Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The King's Man, starring Ray Fiennes, Gemma Arterton, Ray Ifans, Harris Dickinson, and Jimon Hounsou, directed by Matthew Vaughn. Now, I am a little late to this one too because it came out on Christmas, but I gotta say I've seen this movie at least 3 times. First time I fell asleep. Admittedly, it was at 10:45 in the night show, and I know that's not the best explanation, but that's all I got. And so I went back a second time to see how the movie went. And then I watched it at home for note taking reasons on Hulu. And let me just say this right off the bat. Way back when I did the Kingsman series leading up to the Golden Circle back in 2017, I think is when it was. Maybe 2018. I can't remember what year that came out, but my impressions of the first two have I liked the first one the best one. Second one was not great, and we'll see how this third movie goes, or as it's a prequel. So let's get into this movie. We open in South Africa in 1902, where a young Conrad Oxford comes with his father Orlando, played by Ray Fiennes, mother Emily, and their butler Shola, played by G.B.M.H, Hounsou, to visit General Kitchener, while Emily steps out and gets killed as she heard gunshots. And it's odd for them to bring up King Arthur while in a war with a country that I'm led to believe is Russia. But that might be the plot of the movie. I could be wrong. While Conrad was there, and why the fuck would you bring a kid that age to a war zone is questionable of a choice. We pick up 12 years later in 1914, with Conrad all grown up and played by Harris Dickinson, along with another badass butler with Shola named Polly Watkins, played by Gemma Arterton, as her character is not portrayed as well as Roxy as a badass, in my opinion. And I don't think these characters are well developed as far as their arcs are concerned, except for Orlando and Conrad, but that's it. It's honestly, while Conrad wants to see the world and Orlando is protective of it, and the problem I'm having is I'm not caring for these characters as much as the first two Kingsman films. Meanwhile, we get introduced to a villain of the movie, and I say a villain named Grigory Rasputin, played by Rhys Ifans, who works for the villain, whom I've never got the name until maybe at the end of the movie because of these accents. And the reason I call Rasputin a villain in the movie is because despite he gets killed rather early in the film, and I'll bring it up when I get to that point of the movie, the real villain wants to put a hit on Ferdinand, while Orlando and Conrad was present, but eventually in the next scene, King Ferdinand and Queen Sophie get killed in Serbia, and Orlando tells the story of 3 cousins from Queen Victoria named Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, Sir Nicholas of Russia, and King George of England, and Eric Jan Hernussen, forgive me if I say that wrong, who's played by Daniel Bruhl, is a spy for the real villain. And is any of this making sense? No, not really. And is this movie supposed to be a history lesson from England? Because I signed up for a fun action movie. And that is my big problem with the prequel to a Kingsman film, as Conrad wants to sign up to fight with the Englishmen, but Orlando still refuses, and this movie isn't really engaging me, and it's making me fall asleep when I first saw the movie, as it gets kind of boring after a while. Orlando tells the story of how he picked up a rifle and killing people and regretting it until retired from the rifle. And how many stories can we get from him? And can I take it? Fuck no. Rasputin poisons a little boy and resurrects him so that Russia can get forced out of the war, while Conrad wants to go to Russia to stop Rasputin, and Orlando says no until he decides to go with him after Kitchener. And his commander Morton, played by Matthew Good, get blown up at the sea, and Orlando shows Conrad a secret place for secret agents called Kingsman with Shola and Polly. And when they don't trust politicians to do their job, which is typical of the world these days, and he tells the story of the assassination of Ferdinand, they figure out Rasputin was involved, and Orlando decides to go to Russia by train And these shots are fine, and director Matthew Vaughn does an adequate job on giving us a minor history lesson of England, but not so much with the characters. Rasputin throws a party in Russia and orders both Orlando and Conrad to get him a fucking drink, and Orlando talks back to Rasputin and says, "Why don't you glide over there and get me a fucking drink?" Which is the best scene in the trailer as well as in this movie. And they sit together and Rasputin talks about fucking like tigers as a hobby and to do with Englishman while eating dinner, and Rasputin notices Orlando's injured leg and goes to a private room with each other and heals his leg while eating an English cake like a fucking pig, man. I mean, Jesus. And acts all sexual towards his leg and eventually vomits while doing so and heals the leg while he can walk normally to Rasputin and puts him in the ice water while it's snowing. And Shola, which has got to be really fucking cold, by the way, Shola and Conrad bump through the door and fight with Rasputin and saves Orlando. And Shola gets his ass handed to him with Conrad, but Orlando stabs Rasputin and puts him in the ice cold water. And at some point, Polly comes in and shoots him in the head. And this is such an inappropriate scene for an R-rated movie, as this should have been an NC-17 rated movie. I don't like the choreography as much as in the first two Kingsman films, as that scene was totally inappropriate for this movie, as Rasputin dies at this point in an hour into this movie, and it was too quick, in my opinion. I thought he was the main villain, but I guess not. I guess they're trying to bullshit their way out. Orlando, Shola, and Polly celebrate Conrad's birthday as he asks him for the final time for Orlando's blessing to go to war with Russia, and Orlando says he can't bless that, but he goes anyways, and the British intelligence try to crack a code while Orlando asks Polly to crack it before the soldiers go to war with Germany. And eventually she does so, and she believes the Germans are asking Mexico is going to invade America, which makes sense if it was set in the Alamo, but it's not set in the Alamo. So that bugged me to death. Meanwhile, Conrad gets reassigned back to London and sends Archie Reed, who's played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson, kick-ass, to send a message to Orlando of how he will continue to fight in the war and trade places with Conrad. And the Englishmen fight in the war in a place that looks like no man's land, and a British spy brings information to the Englishman but is killed, and Conrad comes and gets it at night with a few others, while other soldiers against the Russians do their best to not make a sound while killing each other, which makes sense, so they don't kill their own. But Conrad carries a soldier back to the battleground with information to end the war for good, and Conrad is shot after a soldier thinks he's a German spy and did not feel sad about his death. And I did not feel sad about his death at all. Unfortunately, not at all, which is a real shame. While the score is not that inspiring in my opinion, nor was it very good in this movie. Orlando becomes a depressed drunk after his son's funeral, and he failed Emily's promise to never make him see the cruel world, as it is while Russia joins the war against the Englishmen, and the real villain named Shepard. It reminds me, who the fuck is Shepard at this point as the movie's villain? I don't understand at this point. An English general comes to give Orlando some news of how England is doomed and getting a message to him of how he's a hero. And a brief talk to by Polly, and he asks for a strong cup of tea and learned the president of the United States still doesn't want to go to war with the Russians. And Orlando visits the White House and have an honest conversation to go to war with Germany and go into the business of Kashmir. And this is the point in the movie is starting to lose me at this point. And I'm not checked out of this movie, as this is a long movie at 2 hours and 11 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And 10 minutes could have been cut out of the movie, in my opinion. And this is one of them, as it doesn't add to the plot, unfortunately. Orlando, along with Shola and Polly, arrive on the bad guys' lair, and the CGI on Ray Fiennes falling into the mountain did look pretty fucking bad, as the CGI for this whole movie in Orlando is knocked out at first until getting licked by a lamb that can climb on walls, which I guess is true in life. I could be wrong. I never seen it, but the stunt looked awful with the lambs moving like they do, and looks really. It just looks really fucking bad. I'm not gonna lie to you. It looks bad. Orlando fights a giant and almost gets himself killed while Shola goes up to the mountain and shows up to Orlando's rescue and cuts the giant's head off, which was stupid as hell as it looked so much better in the trailer than it did in the movie. They get to the bad guy who wants to keep the war going as they have a gunfight that other movies do better than in this movie, and he says the line Colin Firth said in the first movie, which is, "Manners maketh men," reveals himself as Morton, and of fucking course he's the bad guy, because how many movies have I seen Matthew Good playing the fucking bad guy with the last name like Good? I mean, Jesus. The truth is so many to the point it was too goddamn obvious, and Morton and Orlando fight it off like gentlemen as Morton gets his cut in the leg while throwing a grenade at Orlando when he covers himself with a shield, and Morton almost kills Orlando, but a goat stabs Morton's leg even further than he almost falls to death until Orlando catches and lets a medal up from Conrad drop Morton, and the movie ends with the President of the United States going to war with Germany to aid England as they celebrate their victory, and Orlando creates an agency called Kingsman, and we begin the credits until the midway through. We get Eric introducing Vladimir Lenin, their newest member of the flock, named Adolf Hitler, who's infamous for killing half the Jewish people in World War II, and the climax is completely pointless and stupid. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.6 out of 10. The CGI looked absolutely awful and terrible as the movie was a little too long and an unnecessary prequel to better movies. I unfortunately did not care for the characters as much as I wanted to, and I truly wanted to like this movie better than I did, as the heroes are dumb, the villains are dumb, everybody is stupid here, and I just cannot accept that. The movie is pointless and stupid to the point I could have used 10 minutes in the editing room, but that's no way to save the movie anyways, as this is a terrible film, maybe the worst in the Kingsman series thus far. We'll see if there's another Kingsman movie coming up, but... So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for the Kingsman, and until we get a third part of the real Kingsman films, put it back, Eggsy.